High school students, just wanted to give you a quick reminder of an awesome thing we have coming up this Wednesday. Baptisms and B-dubs. That's right, come see your friends get baptized, and in celebration of that, we're gonna have 1,100 buffalo wings from Buffalo Wild Wings. And we need your help to devour those wings. So come early, bring friends. It's gonna be an awesome time, 6:30 to 8:30. Can't wait to see you there. And now let's recap what we talked about this last Wednesday. If there's one thing that we've learned from this series, haters, it's that we all have the potential to be one. We can all turn on hater mode from time to time. We can be extra judgmental to the people at school or hypercritical of our families. But more than that, I think there's someone else who we can be even more of a hater towards, and that's ourselves, us. Sometimes we're our own biggest haters. And I think this is really true for two reasons. One, we spend more time with ourselves than with anyone else. You can't escape yourself. And two, we have a front row seat to our issues. We know our issues better than anyone else's issues. And because of these two things, we can judge ourselves pretty harshly, especially after we mess up. And this is dangerous because sometimes it can lead us to believe this lie. If we're disappointed in ourselves, then God must be really disappointed in us. Sometimes it's easy for us to believe that God is a hater and disapproves of us. It's not true, but it's something that's so easy to believe. We can say to ourselves, God likes good. I'm not always good, so God doesn't always like me. And while this logic makes sense, it's not an accurate representation of what God really feels about you. In the New Testament, the Apostle Paul writes about God's grace and love for us. Even though we mess up, he says this in Romans 5:20. God's law was given so that all people could see how sinful they were. But as people sinned more and more, God's wonderful grace became more abundant. Paul is saying you can't out-sin God's grace. Even as you continue to mess up, God continues to offer his hand of forgiveness. He adds on to this point by saying, don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? See, Paul had experienced God's kindness firsthand. Paul knew he didn't deserve to be loved the way God loved him. He knew he didn't deserve the forgiveness he received. And that's what's crazy, is that God still offers that same love, that same forgiveness to you and I today. What Paul finally realized is that what Christ purchased for us on the cross was freedom. Freedom from guilt, freedom from shame, freedom from the penalty of sin. What we're dealing with is a God whose love is so vast, so deep, so wide, so explosive, so expansive that when we sin, our sin should not serve as a reminder to feel guilty. It should serve as a constant reminder of how great our God is, because we already know he happily took our sin from us. And because we know God takes our sin, it should inspire us to turn from our sin and drive us to obedience. And once we truly understand how infinitely good God is, it changes everything. It'll change how you see him, how you see other people, how you see yourself. So how do we move from just knowing this truth to actually living it out? Well, it requires a mind shift. We have to start changing the way we think. We have to replace our thoughts with truth. So if you tell yourself, God is so tired of my mess ups, replace that with, God delights in forgiving me. If you think in your mind, God could never love me right now, replace that with, God has never stopped loving me. If you tell yourself, I've done way too much, replace that with, I cannot fall out of his grace. And if you hear, God's disappointed in me, replace that with, he's for me. And that's the biggest thing that you need to know today. Even when you fail, God is for you. And I'm excited for you to talk about what this means and what this looks like in your life groups.